It's sort of a guessing game in terms of what technology will be available at the time that we're ready to procure turbines. And that's sort of the secondary clause to the statement, which is we want to be able to procure turbines and equipment, line up those construction companies, and put together a construction plan that falls in line with the conditional use permit requirements that are required of us, all in this unknown space of being able to meet the potential customers' needs. So if a traditional utility comes to us and says, we want power in 2020, the remaining development steps necessary to be able to deliver a project that's ready by 2020 looks very different than a utility that says, I want power in 2022 or 2023. So some of it is being able to be flexible enough on the fly to be able to meet whatever requests are made of us from the customer. But there are definitely some more regimented processes that we have to follow, the conditional use permit being one of them. We know exactly what to expect in terms of applying for a CUP and then working with the local governing agencies that we're working with to obtain that. There's a very defined process for that. Likewise, for procurement of turbines, there's a very defined process for that. Sort of the unknown is at what point we start that process. Sort of determines which products are available to purchase. Yes.
Juan, at a zoning meeting that I attended some time ago, I think it might have been when Jason Knight made a presentation, you were asked about the height of the turbines,
Yes, ma'am.
and one of the zoning board members asked you if it was possible it could be 250 foot. You said no. You know, I'm paraphrasing now, but no, that it wasn't lucrative for the company. And at the time, I felt like you acknowledged that they were going to be 500-600 feet. So taking that for value of your word, I would like to know how zoning, how commissioners can meet the county's needs with yours when there is no research. There is very little research on 500-600. I have went to lengths to find research on 500-600 feet and just basically turning up empty, except for the height and how tall they are. You know, two Statue of Liberties topped on, you know, on one another. But to me, the proposal is just a little, not little, it is very, very vague. And, you know, everything is like, you know, sign your lease and get the zoning to recommend you, the commissioners to sign off, and then you do what you want. And that is what I'm hearing, and I've been to plenty of meetings. I'm sorry.
Well, so I will say that on the under 250, those machines are traditionally machines that are of lower, like nameplate. They call it nameplate. So those machines might be, you know, 700 kilowatts or 1.25s, you know, which would be about a quarter of the actual nameplates, and would require 4 or 5 of the smaller turbines to be equivalent to one of the larger turbines. Now, when you're talking about under or over 500 feet, there are a multitude of different turbines that are under the 500 foot mark, and then there are some that are above. The market is trending upwards, but as we've stated here, you know, it's at the moment, you know, we don't know what's going to be available in the market in a few years.
I guess what I'd like to know is, when are you going to know? When do you have to know by? So that when you go for the conditional use permit, right, it'll be laid out at that time. So if you request a 600 foot turbine, that we then, as a county, have the right to set setbacks and so forth, or you're just going to apply for the permit. We should have the right to assess that before you get a permit, right? So I guess the concern would be that you're sitting here telling us you've done all this work up to this point and you still have no clue what you're going to request of our county. So we as county members would like that information at some point so that we can speak with our zoning board members. You've already been to the zoning board meeting and requested for 600-foot tower information, and if my recollection is right, and there were other people there, you said that if we didn't approve 600 foot, it would squash the whole project.
Well, that's
If I'm.
that's
that is-
paraphrasing several different comments.
No,
So
but that was your comment. So what we would like to know is at what point in time will you have all of your pre-studies and all of those things completed? And then we would know what it is that you would like for us as a community. Are you going to be requesting that? I mean, there's a zoning board meeting tonight.
yes, we'll be attending.
Right, and we're working on trying to make appropriate setbacks for what? Because you haven't told us what you want yet.
Well, so
You know,
on
or
the
proper safety for the community is our main goal.
yeah, I think that's probably a better question for tonight's meeting.
As to when you'll have information on what you're going to ask of the.
The final project plan will not be submitted until we apply for the conditional use permit.
Okay.
That's really, I think, the answer that you're maybe not wanting to hear, but that's the
No, it's the
realistic
answer we wanna know,
for,
and, yeah,
until we apply for that CUP, everything is sort of up on the table in terms of procurement of equipment, in terms of timing for the project itself, and that CUP will then sort of dictate to say, you will be granted this CUP, conditional use permit, to construct the project, and it must be operational by this particular time frame. And if we are not able to meet those obligations in terms of time frame, equipment that we said that we were going to be able to use, and then to bring the actual project online within those requirements, it's essentially like the CUP, then we no longer have it. Very similarly to if you were going to receive a permit to construct a hog barn or something like that, there are parameters that have to be put in place. It's not just this open-ended permit that you can, take 20 years to construct your particular project. So very similarly, we have to have all of our ducks in a row
Do you
to know
have a
what that
time frame
project
when your
will
ducks will be in a row?
Oftentimes, the
Like a month,
CUP is
6
going
months?
to follow when we anticipate the project to be online, and that final
I mean,
operation
ducks in a row
date
to request.
follows
for it.
the anticipated contract sale of power. So if we have a customer come to us that says, I would like power in 2021, we are going to essentially backdate what the remaining steps that need to take place in order to get that project online by 2021. Conversely, if we have somebody say, I want power in 2023, we're going to adjust our timeline accordingly to be able to meet that 2023 timeframe. So it is a moving target, like Jaun Carlos is talking about. It's not quite as easy as saying January of 2020, we plan to apply for the conditional use permit. It may end up being January of 2020 when we apply for it, but it is very much so dependent and tied to sort of the larger picture of the project, which is when is it going to be operational? When do we anticipate turbines to be procured? When will we have completed all the studies necessary to be able to say, with this particular turbine that we anticipate to use for the project, how will it impact the environmental studies that we have done, and how does that play a role into the overall power production date that we anticipate being required of us by the purchaser, be it a traditional utility or a corporate purchaser. So it's not a concrete answer that you're looking for, unfortunately, right now.
That how do communities prepare themselves well for what's best for us as a county and a community at large if we don't know what type of things you're going to be requesting of us when you go for that permit. Are we as a county have time and our zoning board to accurately look at all of that information, our commissioners, and to assess everything? That's good.
Sure.
There's really no information on what you're going to be asking of us other than people are trying to obtain leases and those kinds of things. So, yeah, I mean, it is a moving target, and so that's all I
I
have on
think
that.
this gentleman had a question.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate you guys being here. And one of the things I thought was really neat is you had a plan for like bonding and cleanup and everything like that. Did have a few concerns, and maybe you could answer a question about December 31st, 2019 seems to be a date we're floating around as in regards to construction. Is that a goal for you, is to start construction December 31st of this year? And then also, what happens to the excess energy that is not used, whether it be on a windy night or a cool sunny day? Does that money or does that energy have to be paid back to the grid? You know, issues like that, how does that work?
As far as the construction date, to this, you know, that's a little over a year from now. There's a lot of steps and processes, so it's most likely, it's highly unlikely that that would happen. That would most likely be pushed back. It's going to be pushed back from December 2019. So.
I think at one of the previous meetings, we had talked about sort of the best case scenario based on the status of our current marketing initiative for power purchase. And at that particular time, there was a particular customer who was looking for power to be available in that 2020 timeframe, which would mean then that we would need to start that construction season at some point in 19 to be able to produce a 12/31/2020 commercial operation date. Negotiations for particular projects sort of ebb and flow, and this is another one of those instances where a particular customer was looking for a particular project and subset of availability, and the marketing department then sort of has to ebb and flow their pipeline offering based on where the project is at in terms of deliverability. And so at this point, the project is not baked enough, if you will, to be able to deliver a project by the end of 2020. And thus, that particular customer has chosen to look at a different project within our pipeline to be able to meet their particular needs. So, much like when you turn on your light switch and the light just automatically always turns on, it's a result of lots and lots of hard work to make sure that there's consistently enough power on the grid and that the utilities or customers who are essentially providing power for you to use have gone through the legwork to make sure that their portfolio, their power portfolio, consistently has enough power with their particular mix of energy. So oftentimes it's a mix of coal, gas, and renewables. So another part of your question, which is what happens to the excess of power. And one of the reasons that renewables is so attractive is because it can be ramped up and ramped down on a very quick turn basis. So if you think about, a wood stove and what it takes to get that wood stove at the right temperature to be able to boil a pot of water, it takes a lot of work to be able to get the fire hot enough to produce the coals, to produce enough energy consistently to boil your pot of water. But likewise, if you think of sort of modern day technology and just turning on that electric stove or turning on that natural gas stove, you have immediate heat with the flick of a switch. Renewable projects, like a wind project, like this Old Trails project, is very much more so on that modern end of technology. It requires no time to ramp up and ramp down. It is literally a proverbial switch that allows those turbines to spin. And once they start spinning, they're going to be producing energy. Likewise, if it's a cool sunny day and we don't need the extra electricity that that particular project needs in order to remain and produce a consistent power pipeline for the customer who's purchasing the power, we flip the switch and those turbines stop producing energy, and we don't find ourselves with too much energy on the line, which is another concern. Too much or too little is what creates the brownouts and the blackouts within the power energy grid. And so the beauty and attractiveness of projects like this is we can very quickly turn them on, and likewise, we can very quickly turn them off, as opposed to a natural gas plant that you have, there's this ramp up period in order to get the plant operating at full capacity. And likewise, to ramp it down, there's a significant detailed process that takes time in order to cool those systems down so that they're not producing the energy.
So there's, if you turn them off, there would be no excess to
Correct.
give back to the grid, but you also aren't storing that for later use.
Correct. At this point, there are no plans for battery storage for a particular project.
Thank you.
I think she was next, and then we'll come back to you.
Could you share with me some wind farms that are in existence now and running that are 600-foot turbines in the United States?
We'd have to do some research, and if you plan on coming tonight, we can come prepared with that information. I do know, traditionally speaking, it takes a very particular turbine for more windy areas. So North Dakota, for example, we actually have to use smaller capacity turbines because the resource is so high that those particular turbines do not operate as efficiently as they would with the smaller technology. In this particular part of the country, there is ample resource, but it's not near as high as some of the other areas of the country, but it is higher than others. You know, take for example, the West Coast. The resource there, or the resource that we have available to us in Wisconsin, that's another particular state where there's resource, but the wind resource is not near as high. And so, and oftentimes you're able to have different technology mixes based on sort of what the expected output is. I can tell you that we would not be considering a particular technology for this particular area that is not going to run as efficiently as possible, as safely as possible. It may be that we're asking to install technology that we ourselves have not installed in this particular state before. And I can almost guarantee that because the 4 existing projects that we have in Kansas were all built prior to 2016. And technology, much like an iPhone today, in comparison to an iPhone in 2016, looks very, very different. Turbine technology is very much a commodity that is constantly receiving upgrades and updates to run more efficiently and more adeptly to its resource. So I can guarantee you that the turbines that we installed back in 2016 are no longer available to purchase in the quantity that we would need, nor would we consider to install them in this particular space because there have been so many technology advancements. But we will try and drill down the 600 plus. I don't know what turbine was.
There is one that was proposed late last year in New York, and I know they met with a lot of resistance. And one reason they're meeting with a lot of resistance is because of many of the people sitting here. The effects are enough. They are enough.
So we'll do some research between now and then.
Okay.
I think she was next, and then we'll go to you.
On one of the slides, it stated that you had paid out about $5 million over a 3-year period to landowners. How many landowners was that money paid to?
Well, so in contrast, the Slate Creek project is about half of the proposed size of the Old Trails project. So the exact number I don't have right off the top of my head, but I can tell you with certainty it's under 100 total landowners.
Per year?
So it's the same landowner base throughout the life of the project. Yes.
I was just wondering, when you go into your construction phase of these projects, like our township infrastructure isn't set up for the kind of trucks you're gonna cranes. What do we do in that case? Are the township liable for any part of that?
So leading up to construction, we will have an appropriate conversation. It's likely going to be required by the COP But there will be a conversation that takes place with the appropriate local governing bodies to create a road use agreement. And that agreement, very much so like the decommissioning agreement, is going to be a conversation that both parties are amicable to, indicating in many cases we have to improve the roads to be able to accommodate the weight and the type of equipment that will need to move from point A to point B to install a project. And then once that is done, they'll have to repair the roads that were damaged as a result of our time there. And then in often cases, we actually have to remove some of that infrastructure. So if you think of a delivery truck that's long enough to be able to deliver the blades and making a 90-degree turn, it's not possible. So oftentimes we have to widen the road to be able to make those 90-degree turns. Post-construction, nobody wants that there. Not only do they not want that there, they don't want to have to maintain that. So we improve the road to be able to accommodate the equipment. Once construction is complete, then we actually remove the extra infrastructure and then restore any damage that had been done during the actual construction itself.
So do you buy access if that's not the intersection you're speaking of? If that's a non-participating leasee and is basically doesn't want to be, how do you gain access to their land? And especially with your, I know you connect your turbines together, and how do you gain access to a non-participating landowner?
So public roads is slightly different than collection lines, things that I think that you were alluding to in terms of connecting the turbines together. So the lease itself, you can either have a full lease, which is going to be the option to host a turbine facility, or that second lease that Jaun Carlos talked about is you support the project, but maybe you don't own enough land to actually host a facility, but you want to be able to be involved. That secondary type lease allows for collection line access to be utilized across your property, which in case then we would be able to connect the two turbines that may not be on.
You're not understanding the question.
You're not answering
You're not answering the question.
Okay.
I guess,
Can you-
I guess my,
Can you let me finish?
Okay.
Thank you. So if you choose not to sign into a lease, we do not have the right to put collection lines across your property. Public roads, however, are very different in nature, and if the public road is needed to be utilized, we would work with your road committee to come up with an amicable agreement to be able to travel from point A to point B to provide the equipment a means to get from installation site to
well,
installation
I
site.
think the county is like a 66-foot right-of-way. So if you have to go 100 and some feet,
We wouldn't be able to do that then.
so,
We have to stay within public right of way.
but the collection lines, that again, you're not gonna
Collection
go
lines will
around
need to
the
be
property
approved.
to get from one turbine, so is it like an eminent domain situation?
You have to have a signed agreement with us for collection lines. So if you do not have any interest in hosting any of those facilities, so long as you don't sign the agreement, we cannot put those facilities on your land.
So are those lines all underground, or how do you do that?
So turbine to turbine is used collection line, which is underground. And then those strings, there will be multiple strings of turbines that are connected then to a substation. And that substation then will provide overhead transmission lines to the larger interconnection.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
I just don't know, liability-wise, if they are approved and were put up and something happened and there was a faulty turbine and something, I don't know, blade came off, maybe spark, set something on fire. I think you get where I'm going here. who is liable for that? Does that fall where EDF would take the whole liability? Because you're looking at a commercial type industrial product on agricultural land where somebody has a private type of insurance versus a commercial type of insurance, and that's very different. So how would that be taken care of?
Everything related to the turbine is the responsibility of the owner, be it EDF, if we retain the assets and sell the power long-term under a power purchase agreement to Google or the utility or what have you, we retain the rights to the assets. We also retain the risk to the assets. So if it sparks, if a blade falls off, both of those things that you mentioned, we are responsible not only for the asset itself, but for any damage that it would cause. Likewise, the traditional utility or Google is interested in purchasing the project and utilizing the power, they assume all of those original agreements that have been made to the community itself. So they then assume the right to maintain and own the assets. They also assume the risk to maintain and own the asset.
So if, for example, like hydraulic fluid spilled all over, you would be responsible for taking it to an EPA level and making sure that it was cleaned up at the EPA level and everything was back the way it should have been. Okay.
I think there was one more question.
Yeah, you talked about customers, so you're working with our Board of Public Utilities
No,
at all?
no.
Okay,
Board of Public Utilities is not involved in whatsoever.
so how will you be transferring the power that you would acquire from your turbines?
So we have to go through SPP, which is Southwest Power Pool,
Okay.
and they are the independent agency that is charged with making sure that there is always the appropriate amount of power on the transmission line. Never too much or never too little. So any new power request, whether it be a natural gas plant or a coal plant, a solar facility or a wind facility, has to go through this very same process and get their interconnection agreement, as is referenced. We have to get that agreement in order to be able to put power across those lines. Now, the customer that we would sell either the power or the project to is then able to take delivery of the power either on paper or as an actual commodity through that same highway system, if you will, of transmission.
Do you have any customers locally here yet that utilize some of the power? I know you sell power to some of the industries and things like that.
Yeah, so KCP&L, for example, is a traditional utility who has purchased the Sperrville 1, 2, and 3 projects. They would have utilized the power through that SPP system, just as, I'm trying to think, I think it was Google who purchased the Slate Creek project. So regardless if it's a utility or a corporate purchaser, they all have to utilize the same means to be able to get the power.
Yeah,
And the
but-
pilot money? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, but still, you don't, none of this is dedicated for anybody yet, but you're on this
For
proposal.
Old
line.
Trail,
So this,
no.
you don't have anybody that wants this power yet? And then the pilot money,
Mhm.
it's my understanding that EDF had approached our community with some monies. I'm not sure that the commissioners will, it's some buzz. And is it true that you've given some money to our community?
There have been
Thank
donations that
the-
have been made
yeah.
on behalf of the project, but that is not a pilot agreement or any payment.
So how does that work? You just come into the community and go, you know, what's the purpose of doing that?
Of making donations?
Yeah, as EDF, how did you determine who got the donation money?
So we were approached in some cases by these organizations looking for funds to be able to use on particular projects that they had in store, and in other cases, landowners signed into the project had approached us to say, hey, the food bank is doing a drive to put together Thanksgiving baskets. Would you be interested in participating? That sort of conversation had taken place. And then in some instances, the company itself did some legwork to identify. So EDF really does want to be a viable steward in the communities that we're working with. And so on a regular basis, it's not normal for us to make donations on behalf of the project. By no means is that part of the pilot agreement that we talked about, that's completely separate. And that's typically generated and enforced once the project is operational.
Do you continue getting those donations on a yearly basis, or is that kind of a one-time, like, welcome, we're coming to?
So there are donations made throughout the development process. At that point then, if we retain the assets, it becomes an asset of our asset management group. They have their own sort of processes that they do to donate money, but they definitely continue donations in those particular communities. And then if we talk about sort of that secondary option, which is a Microsoft or a utility will come in and want to purchase the asset outright, it then falls under their wheelhouse in terms of determining how much and how frequently any donations occur.
Just to follow up on the question that Sarah had about liability, my understanding of the liability from the law firms that I have been reading about in conjunction with wind farms, wind turbines, is that if something goes wrong, for example, a fire is initiated, goes on to a non-participating land, that those people can and most likely will sue the lessee or the landowner, as well as you guys or whoever owns the project at the time. So, there's nothing that's going to keep a lessee or a participating land person from not being sued. They're still going to be sued.
That's a true statement. I mean, there's nothing protecting you as a landowner today
That's
from your
exactly
neighbor
right.
suing you. So, I don't think anybody would get up here and try and indicate that it's not an option or it's not a risk. I can tell you that the leases that we are providing to your community assume all liability risk for the technology and infrastructure that is placed on there. So, you're right. That's not to say that
Legal
you as an
fees, et
individual
cetera,
cannot
would
be named in the suit.
Is it true that the leases have gag orders in them? That the landowners are not allowed to speak and say that they've signed the lease?
No.
Okay, we probably need to wrap this up.
Can I
Go
ask a
ahead.
question? Your brochure cited a study that has actually been debunked, but where you claim that there is zero loss to property values. I'm a 5-acre owner and I'm very concerned about my property values. So I'm wondering if you stand behind the claim that my property values will not be affected in any way, are you willing to put some sort of a clause in your contract that guarantees if I need to move because of these towers that will surround my house, that I will get fair market value or you will make up that difference?
It comes down to, from a developer perspective, what agreements they want in place for the project. Historically, as a company, what we put in place for one, we do for everybody in that particular project, so we don't have any individual or side agreements. What benefits one community participant is felt and impactful to all of the community participants for a given project. The internet will tell you whatever you're hoping to be able to hear, and I'm not saying that.
I've looked up the two
I'm
biggest
not
studies in the
saying that
world. Your
what-
study cites mere thousands of homes, where the two largest studies that were not bought and paid for by a wind farm that were done from universities cited 3 million homes researched and 1 million homes researched. And they tell me that I will lose at least 11% on my home. And they aren't talking about 600-foot towers. So I can't afford to lose 11%, but I certainly can't afford to lose more than that. And I think if we look even just at common sense and we throw the studies out the door, if I'm trying to sell my home and somebody's looking for a country property and there are 5 towers out surrounding 3 sides of my house, would you choose that house or would you choose a house without? So it's obviously going to affect me in some way. So I'm just saying, if you stand behind your work, can you not put in a clause that says if somebody loses value, especially somebody who's non-participating, if a non-participating person loses half the value of their house, there should be something in there that protects those people.
So it's something that we have as an option to consider. There is nothing preventing a 5-acre parcel from participating in the project. We are not forcing anybody to participate, so if you don't want to participate, that is your choice. But I just want to go on record to say that we are not excluding any particular landowners from having a conversation with us. Secondary to that, right, wrong, or indifferent, value means something different to everybody. Somebody could choose not to want to buy your property simply because it's painted red, as opposed to being painted white. And so it really, it's a very hard topic to quantify, to say that a value, either gain or loss,
But
is as a
you've
result.
quantified it in your brochure by saying that there's zero effect.
So
So
the
how come
study
you
that
get to
was done in
quantify it and I
2009
don't?
and 2013 had evaluated a number of homes and saw that there was zero impact on those particular communities. Now, again, I think both of us, and as a company, as an industry, can say that I can assure you in the projects that I have developed and overseen development of over the last 13 years, I have not had one landowner call me up and say, I can't sell my property because I have a wind turbine on it, or I can't sell my property because my community has turbines on it.
Then back it up. Back it up in your
And
contract.
that's
all
something
I'm
that we
saying.
have available to us. The only point I'm trying to make to you is it's an inquantifiable term, because it becomes this he said, she said, or he said type conversation, to be able to say that my property has had a value change because of fill in the blank.
But do you understand what I'm saying?
I
If
do.
you're saying it's
I do.
inquantifiable, then you don't get to also turn around and say that there's zero effect. Do
Okay,
you understand what I'm saying?
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anybody else yet, my commissioners? Any questions? Is there one more question yet before we adjourn? Okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Jenny, Juan, for coming. And I think you'll have another meeting here.
Well, I guess, I was thought they were gonna sit me begging to have the moratorium